Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel Amiras Hashem today. We will be learning Daf Kuf Yud Amid Aleph. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We pick up today on the bottom line of Kuf Tes Amid Beis Siman Shin Ches Sif Lamed Vav. Our learning should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael Hanesunim Batzaro Bashivya Ha'imdim Bein Bayam Ubein Bayabasha Hamakim Yerachem Aleihem V'Yetziam Yitzar L'Rvacha Me'afela La'Oira Mishiba L'Geula Hashta Bagalo of Izman Kariv and Amar Amen. Our learning should be a schus refuah shalema from Shemer ben Esther Fradel, Yitzchak ben Siyain ben Dusha, Rafal Yisrael Menachem ben Ita Gnendel, Tzvi ben Leah Miriam, Chavadasa Baserel, and Rivka. Name just escaped me. Rivka Bas Shiraleah. They should have a refuah shalema besar shar Chayle Yisrael. Our learning should also be a schus for Yonason ben Michal, Yoel ben Michal. The Rebbeinu Shalom should watch over them together with all of our other brothers and sisters who find themselves in harm's way. B'chol makom shehem. So yesterday in Sif Lamed Dalid and in Sif Lamed Hey, we discussed the heter of a graf shel rei. A graf shel rei, the Mechaber told us, if you have excrement, right? Rei is literally excrement, or ki, vomit, tsaya, any kind of filth. All of these items are things that are muktzah machmas gufay. These are items that are inherently muktzah. They're certainly not kalim. They're certainly not a meichel. They're not foodstuffs. They're inherently items that have no use on Shabbos. They're similar to eitzim va'avonim, sticks and stones that you would find in the backyard. These are very muktzah. They're inherently muktzah. They're muktzah machmas gufay. You would not be allowed to move them, not for any reason at all, not even tzarech mekaymai or tzarech gufay. However, Chazal gave a heter of graf shel rei. Since these are repulsive items, and it wouldn't be covered abrius for people to have to be exposed to them throughout Shabbos, there's this heter of graf shel rei that you're allowed to be metaltal them, and you're allowed to remove them from places where people will be exposed to them. So what we learned is, if these are, in the words of the Mechaber in Sif Lamed Daled, if these items are located in the chotzer, in the courtyard, or in the house where people live, or we learned in the Mishnah Berurah, even if they're in the mavui, even if they're in the alleyway, in the street, in a place where people are going to have to be exposed to them, assuming that there's an Erev, and Hoitzah is not an issue, you're allowed to be metaltal these items in order to remove them so that people should not have to be exposed to them. Against that backdrop, we move along to Sif Lamed Vav on the bottom line, Kuf Tes Amid Beis. Says the Mechaber, Ein oisim graf shel rei lechatchila. While we do have this heter that you're allowed to be metaltal, a graf shel rei, and just a reminder, the literal translation of the phrase graf shel rei is a chamber pot of excrement. So, and we learned yesterday in the Mishnah Berurah that the graf itself, the keli, the vessel, the chamber pot itself, is something that has the same heter of the graf shel rei. We consider it to be a repulsive item that people are not interested in having to look at. But now, says the Mechaber, Ein oisim graf shel rei lechatchila, you're not allowed to initially go ahead and create the situation of graf shel rei, tahainu, meaning, lahavi davar she'ased lima'es, you're not allowed to bring something that is going to become repulsive, kidei lo yitziyah likeshe yimais, so that when it is repulsive, you're going to go ahead and remove it. In other words, the Mechaber is saying you can't do this with malice aforethought. You can't go ahead and say, oh, I'll make a mess, and then it's going to be a graf shel rei, and then I could just go ahead and get rid of it. V'em avar va'asoi, if you did create a graf shel rei, mutar lo yitziyah. B'di'evet, we're not going to consign you, we're not going to penalize people and say that they have to be exposed to repulsive items. No, we're going to allow you to take it out. But you're not allowed to create the graf shel rei situation initially with the knowledge that, oh, there's a heter of graf shel rei, I'll be able to get rid of it. I think a very practical example of this would be, we had spoken about the fact that eggshells are muktzah. So I said in the shir that if you're peeling eggs for your egg salad, on Erev Shabbos, the best thing to do is to peel the eggs straight into the garbage can. That way you have no shaila of tiltul muktzah at all. You peel them and you drop them straight into the garbage can. We said you could peel it onto a plate if the plate has a piece of bread on it. So then you could be metaltal the plate with the bread together with the eggshells. We said if somehow the eggshells did end up on the counter or on the table, and now you need the place that's being occupied by them, so you have eggshells on the dining room table, and now you need to serve the Suda on the dining room table, so we said you could be metaltal them using tiltul min atzad. But you can't go ahead and say, oh, it doesn't matter where I peel the eggs, because once I have a pile of eggshells, it's a graf sharei, and there's a heter to remove a graf sharei. A pile of eggshells is a repulsive thing to look at. So I'll just peel the eggs wherever I want, it'll become a graf sharei, and now I could just scoop it up and throw it out. No, you're not allowed to create that graf sharei situation lechatchila. Now, if you look at the words of the Mechaber, and you translate them literally, the Mechaber says, Ein oisim graf sharei lechatchila. You're not allowed to initially go ahead and create the situation of graf sharei. Tahainu, which means lahavi davar she'asid limois, to bring something that's going to become repulsive, kidei lo yitzia likasheyimois, in order so that you will be able to remove them when it becomes repulsive. That's how you translate the words literally. The Mishnah Berurah is going to point out that that's not quite what it means. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut in Kuf Lam and Test, the very bottom of Kuf Tesam and Beis in my print. Kedei lo yitziyai. B'Gemara mashma, the Gemara in Beitza is mashma. Da afilu im loy asa kedei lo yitziyai. We don't have to take the Mechaber so literally. You didn't create the graf shalrei in order so that you should be able to remove it. Ella davar ha'asi l'b'sayf lo yitziyai. You peeled the eggshells over there, not that you peeled it so that you should be able to remove it. No, you did it knowing that eventually it's going to become a graf sharei, and then you're going to employ the heter of graf sharei. Gam ken aser. Because even though Chazal gave you this heter to remove something which is repulsive, nevertheless, but to go ahead initially and go ahead and do something where you're going to have to come on to the heter of graf sharei, aser, that is prohibited. That's aser. The reason the Mechaber used the wording that he used, mishum seifa nakat, that's because of the end of the sif. The b'diavad ein lesar av she'echnisai b'ofen zeh. B'diavad, we're not going to penalize somebody, even if he created the graf sharei only with the intention, he didn't peel the eggs because he wanted to peel the eggs, and he said to himself, all right, I don't have to worry about what I do with the eggshells because I'm going to peel the eggshells onto the counter, it's going to become a graf sharei, and I'm allowed to remove a graf sharei. No, what this guy did was, somehow, he had to get rid of eggshells. So what he did was, he created a whole big mound of eggshells so that it should be mutter to remove it because it's a graf sharei. Well, that would be a problem anyway, because the eggshells are muktzah. He wouldn't be allowed to scoop them up and move them all into one place. But it seems that what the Mishnah Berurah is saying is, if you would take the Mechaber literally, the Mechaber seems to be saying, you created a graf sharei in order to be able to remove it. And the reason the Mechaber is saying that, says the Mishnah Berurah, is because even in such a case, v'im avar va'asoi, if you did do that, mutter lo yitziyai, it still would be mutter to remove it. You're not allowed to do it lechatchila, but it still would be mutter to do it. Now, it happens to be that this halacha, that you can't make a graf sharei lechatchila, is a very complex halacha. The complexities are really beyond the scope of what we do here, but sometimes when you have a shaila about a graf sharei, about removing something which really would be mutter, which would really be muktzah makbas gufay, but you want to employ the heter of graf sharei, or you have a shaila where you're doing something which might create a graf sharei lechatchila, it's kedai to ask a shaila. Moving along to Sif Lamed Zayin, says the Mechaber, b'makom de'ikah pseida, in a place where there's a risk of financial loss, Mutter lahachnis mitasai eitzel graf sharei. You would be allowed to bring your bed into the location where the graf sharei is, v'likbaya yeshivasai sham, to establish that you're actually living where the graf sharei is, kedei lo yitziai, so that you will be able to then use the heter of graf sharei to remove it. So the backdrop of this halacha here in Sif Lamed Zayin is what we learned earlier, that in order to employ the heter of graf sharei, you could only use that heter when the graf sharei is in a place that you frequent, right? What did the Mechaber say in Sif Lamed Daled? Im hayu b'chatzer sheyoshvim ba. When could you use the heter of graf sharei? If the graf sharei is located where you live. If it's located in your living space, so you're going to have to be exposed to it on a continual basis. That's when Chazal gave you the heter of graf sharei. But like we spoke out yesterday, if the graf sharei is in a storage area in the backyard, then you have no heter of graf sharei. Now you have a problem. You have a graf sharei where if that graf sharei is going to remain where it is, if the repulsive item is going to remain where it is, it's going to cause you a financial loss. But the problem is that you don't have a heter of graf sharei to remove it. Why? Because it's not in your living space. It's in a place that you don't frequent. Says the Mechaber, you know what you could do? We're going to allow you to use a little bit of a ha'arama. We're going to allow you to use a little bit of halachic trickery. You could take your bed, or like the Mishnah Berurah is going to say, it doesn't have to be your bed. You could bring your table and your chairs and set it up where the graf sharei is. Now the graf sharei is going to be considered to be in your living space, and now you can employ the heter of graf sharei to go ahead and remove it. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. It says the Mishnah Berurah is cut and kuf mem. The ikap seda. We're talking about a case where if the graf sharei is going to remain where it is, you're going to risk suffering a financial loss. Hainu sheyavali de hefsid im yeshara graf sham sheyiganev sham. Maybe the loss is that this graf sharei has value to it, even if it's a chamber pot, right? A chamber pot costs money. If somebody steals it, you're going to have to replace it. So maybe the chamber pot got left somewhere in the backyard where you can't really get away with calling it in your living space. But if you leave it there, somebody could come and go ahead and steal it. So you want to be able to move it. Or maybe some other problem is going to come up if you leave it over there. And, excuse me, 1 second. Okay. V'hu munach babayis be'ezeh cheder makom she'ein darsham. The graf sharei is located in a room that's not part of your living space. Or like I said, or it's in your backyard. Or it's sitting in the backyard in a place that you don't really frequent. Because if that's not the case, if the graf sharei was really in your living space, then automatically it would be mutter to remove it. This heter of Sif Lamed Zayin is specifically for when the graf sharei is located in a place that's not your mokim dira. It's not the chatzer sheyoshvim ba. It's not in your living space. Now you need the heter of Sif Lamed Zayin. You could go ahead and use harama to make it your living space. I've cut and kuf mem aleph v'likbaya yeshivasai. You could establish that your mokim dira is where the graf sharei is. Kegoyin mitasi lishkai v'aleha. You could bring your bed there to lay down and take a nap. Or bring your table there and eat something there. That will establish that location as being part of your living space. And now you'll be able to use the heter of graf sharei to remove this graf. But to just pull up a chair and sit down where this graf sharei is, that will not allow you to employ the heter of graf sharei. Moving along to Sif Lamed Ches, second line down, Kuf Yod Amud Aleph. A new topic. So, dirt is a primary example of something that would be muktzah machmas gufay. Dirt is not a keli. Dirt is not a meichel. Dirt doesn't have any specific usage that is Shabbos appropriate. So, dirt is like sticks and stones. Dirt is muktzah machmas gufay. You're not allowed to move it, not even tzarech gufay, not even tzarech mekaymai. Now, having said that, we have to remember that back in the day, when homes had earthen floors, earth was a very, very useful item. Nowadays, if you spill something on your kitchen floor, you take a paper towel, you wipe it up. You take a shmata, you wipe it up. Back in the day, if something spilled on the kitchen floor, you took some earth and you sprinkled earth or sand over it, because the floor itself was an earthen floor. It was only a question of covering up the mess. So you took dirt and you used it to cover up the mess. So dirt was actually a very useful object. At the same time, it's still muktzah machmas gufay. So now, we have learned already in the past that when something is muktzah machmas gufay, there are steps that you can take to make it muchan for Shabbos use and make it no longer muktzah machmas gufay, right? We had all of these conversations of what you can do with different items. Is it possible to turn them into something that would have been muktzah machmas gufay and turn it into a keli? So we spoke about the rock in the backyard that you want to go ahead and you want to use as a doorstop. Like this, the rock is muktzah machmas gufay. But if you go ahead and you do a ma'aseh to the rock, if you chisel off the bottom to make it nice and flat, and now you want to use it as a doorstop, if you do that chiseling before Shabbos, you did a ma'aseh to the stone to turn it into a keli to make it a doorstop. Now it's a doorstop. Now it's a keli. Now it's a keli shemalach delaheter. It's no longer muktzah machmas gufay. We spoke about being miyakid something b'machshava. If you look at something and you mentally designate it. So we spoke about mentally designating it for temporary use, mentally designating it for permanent use. But we had a lot of different steps that you could take in order to take something that would have been muktzah machmas gufay and turn it into something which is no longer muktzah. Says the mechaber, you could do that by dirt as well. So says the mechaber here in Sif Lamed Ches, Machnis Adam mi ba'od yom maloi kupasai ofar. You could bring in a box full of dirt on Erev Shabbos, umiyaked loy keren zavis, and you could pour out the dirt into a designated corner of the house. Now the point of these words in the mechaber are, I guess, you're not taking the box of dirt and just spilling it out anywhere on your floor. You see, if you would take the dirt and you would spill it out just anywhere on the floor, in a makam drisas regel, in a place where people are going to come and step on it, then what you're doing is you're being mevatel it to the karka habayis. Remember, we're talking about cases where back in the day, where the floor of the house was dirt. So by taking another box of dirt and just throwing it on the floor where people are going to step on it, now it's going to be bottled to the karka habayis, and the same way the karka habayis is muktzah, this additional dirt is also going to be muktzah. What you're doing over here, says the mechaber, is you're being miyachid like keren zavis. What you're doing is you're pouring out the pile of dirt into a designated corner of the house where, okay, now I have a pile of dirt that is muchan for Shabbos use. So now, if a child soils the floor, I could take some dirt and I could sprinkle it over the dirt, over the stain, over the filth on the floor to cover it up. Now, we'll see. Many of you are thinking this might involve other malachas. We're going to discuss that. But the point over here is that by being miyakad like keren zavis, by pouring out this dirt in a designated corner in the house so that it should be there for Shabbos use, now it is muchan. Now it's no longer muktzah, machmas gufay. No, now it's muchan for Shabbos use, and now you could use it. So again, the mechaber said, Machnis Adam mi ba'od yom maloi kupasai afar. A person could bring in on Erev Shabbos a full box of dirt, umiyakad loy keren zavis, and he could pour it out into a designated corner of the house, and then va'isabay kol tzrachav b'Shabbos. And then he could use it for whatever needs he has on Shabbos. Kigoyin, for example, litar mimenu lechasois tsaya oiroik. He could take some of this dirt from the pile, and he could use it to cover excrement or some spittle that ended up on the floor, or anything similar. Aval im lo yichad loy keren zavis. But if he did not pour it out in a designated area, he just dumped it on the floor, in a place where people are going to walk, then batal agava for abayis, then it becomes batal to the other earth that's already on the floor, va'asal taltaloi, and now it is going to be muktzah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Kuf Ben Beis. Afar, the Mishnah Berurah is putting in what we inserted between the lines. You see, the Mechaber just says that you're bringing in the box of Afar, umiyachid like Keren Zavis. So if you read the Mechaber simply, it sounds like what this person did was, he brought in a box of dirt, and he put the box down, full of dirt, in a corner. The Mechaber doesn't say anything about pouring out the dirt, right? Look at the words. You're bringing in Maloi Kupasai Offer. You're bringing in a box full of dirt. Umiyachid like Keren Zavis, and you're designating a corner of the house to put it in. He never said that you poured it out. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Eizkat Kuf Ben Beis Ofar, Uma'ara bebeisai ala aretz. You brought it in and you spilled it out. And the Mishnah Berurah is quoting this from Rashi at Shabbos Daf Nun Amud Aleph. Now there's a chiddush here, Rabbi Yisai. I'll tell you what the chiddush is. The chiddush is that Rashi is telling us it has to be that you poured it out on the floor. Because if you didn't pour the dirt out on the floor, we wouldn't need this sifkat in Shulchan Aruch. If you had the dirt in a box, and you brought it in, and you put it down in a corner, and you kept the dirt in the box, then the dirt is automatically muchan. It's dirt in a box that you prepared for use. So then I wouldn't have to come on to any chiddush over here that, oh, you should know, you could bring in the box of dirt on Erev Shabbos and it's not muktzah. Of course it's not muktzah. But the act of putting it in the box and bringing it in the box, you were already making it. The chiddush over here is, even though you brought in the box and you poured it out on top of the earthen floor, now it is a shaila. Now that you poured it out on the earthen floor, now it depends where you did it. If you did it in the Keren Zavis, if you designated a corner for it, so now it's muchan for Shabbos use. But if you just poured it out anywhere in the middle of the floor, now it's bottled to the karka habayis. That's what's behind this very simple Mishnah Berurah Katan Kuf Ben Beis that you could just blow through, right? Umara bebeis alaret. You put it on the ground. Weiter Kuf Ben Gimel. But then you didn't see the chiddush. And this is not just the Chavetz Chaim, not that the Chavetz Chaim is a just. He's bringing it from Rashi. Rashi didn't write extra words, Rabbi Yisai. So you have to see, there's something here. There's a chiddush here. Eis Katan Kuf Ben Gimel, Lital Mimenu, this dirt is now not muktzah, it's muchan, and now you're allowed to take dirt from it. Points out the Mishnah Berurah, it's not so simple to take dirt from a pile of dirt on Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, if you're going to take dirt, ube'inyan she'ein by mishum asiyas guma, you have to make sure that when you scoop dirt from the pile, you don't form a depression in the pile of dirt. Dahainu, meaning sheyital b'shaveh, you have to take off dirt from the top of the pile and create a flat plateau on top of the pile. You have to take off an equal amount of dirt, not that you scoop out and now you formed a depression. Forming a depression in the dirt would be a terlada of the malacha of boine. You're not allowed to do that on Shabbos. Oishachel dak, or it has to be that you're talking about very fine sand. So since it's fine, it doesn't hold its shape. Even if you take out a scoop, the walls of the dirt where you took the scoop out are just going to collapse because it's very fine. So you're not going to have a defined depression left in the sand. Or even if it's not very fine sand, it's very, very loose sand. Again, the point is, you have to do this in a way that you're not going to form a depression. Because if you form a depression, you have a problem. You can only do this if it's fine or if it's loose, so that the walls will collapse right away, and you're not going to have a remaining depression. If you look in Siman Tov Tzaddik Ches, what is spelled out over there is, the chiddush over here is, you might have thought that this isser of forming a guma only applies to the undisturbed dirt, earth on the ground. If you have earth that was detached from the ground, and now you made a pile of earth on the ground, is there still an isser of asiyas guma? The answer is yes, there is. And there's even a problem of asiyas guma in dirt that's inside a keli. So the problem of asiyas guma is a big problem. Moving along to Ois Kat and Kuf Mem Dalid. If you're not miyached a keren zavis, if you don't pour out this dirt in a designated corner, you just pour it out in the middle of the floor somewhere, then it's going to be bottled to the karka abayis. Says the Mishnah Berurah. This is true, even if what you did was on Erev Shabbos, you filled up a box of dirt. Why did you fill it up? Because you knew you needed dirt in the house on Shabbos to cover up a mess. So that's why you prepared the box of dirt. You brought the box of dirt into the house, adaita dahachi. You brought it into the house with the intent that you're going to use this dirt if you have to cover up a mess. So you would think that all of this means that the dirt is going to be muchan. No. Once you pour it out on the floor in a place where people are going to walk, it's no longer muchan, it's bottled to the kaka abayis, and now it becomes muktzah. Once you pour it out in the middle of the floor somewhere, in a place where people are going to walk, it becomes bottled to the karka abayis, it becomes muktzah, and it becomes Aser. What's very clear from this is, on Shabbos, if you have an earthen floor, you're not allowed to just bend down and take some earth off the floor to sprinkle it somewhere. No, all the dirt on the floor is muktzah. Says the Ramah. 4 lines down near the end of the line. Hago. V'lochein, based on this halacha, muter likach perois hatumunim b'choil, you're allowed to pull produce that is buried in sand. Ki ein oisai ofar muktzah, because that dirt that the produce is buried in is not muktzah. Now, this is an interesting Ramah. You know, I took a look at the Beis Yosef that the Ramah is pulling this from, and from the words of the Beis Yosef over there are 2 ways that I can interpret the Beis Yosef. One way I could interpret the Beis Yosef is that the Beis Yosef is talking about a case where somebody brought in dirt for the express purpose of keeping produce in it. Now, I'm not exactly sure why one would do this. Maybe it was a way of keeping the produce fresh. But somebody brought in dirt on Erev Shabbos and put the produce into the dirt as a means of storage. Now, just by doing that, right, so what did you do? You brought in the dirt, you put it in a designated place in the house, and you have your produce in it. Well, just the fact that you did that makes that dirt mucham. You brought in that dirt on Erev Shabbos for an express purpose on Shabbos, and you didn't put it b'makom drisas raglayim. Obviously, you didn't put it in a place where people are going to step on it. So says the Ramah, now you could go ahead and you could pull the produce out. Of course, you're going to have to make sure there's no problem of asiyas gumois. The other way that you could interpret the Beis Yosef is no. The person brought in dirt on Erev Shabbos for the purpose that the Mechaber explained. The Mechaber's case was somebody brought in dirt on Erev Shabbos and he was miyachid keren zavis, so he should be able to have dirt for use on Shabbos. Now, after he did that, he went ahead and he buried some produce in that dirt. Okay, now the dirt's not muktzah because you were making it. You were miyachid it for Shabbos use. So now you could pull the produce out. Says the Mishnah Berurah Kat Kuf Mem Hey. Hatmun b'chayil v'im tamen ba'ofar shu muktzah, but if the produce was buried in dirt that is muktzah, even if the produce is in dirt that you weren't making, so it's dirt that is muktzah, there still might be an eitzah how you could get the produce out, employing tiltal menatzad, etc., and we will discuss that in greater detail in Siman Shin Yud Aleph. By the way, an interesting ramification of some of these halachas would be children playing in a sandbox on Shabbos. So if you have a sandbox, that sand is muchan. That sand is in the sandbox for the express purpose of being played with. Now, in order for the kids to play in a sandbox on Shabbos, there has to be no issue of asiyas guma, which becomes a little bit tricky. Certainly, if the sand is moist, you can't play in the sandbox on Shabbos because you're going to be making gumais. So there are things, I think, that kids could do in a sandbox that don't come to shilas once the sand is not muktzah because it's muchan. So I don't know, they have these toys that you pour the sand in and it makes wheels spin, etc., etc. But to go build things, obviously, out of the sand, that obviously you can't do. To go dig in the sand and form depressions, that obviously you can't do. So there would be issues, but as far as the sand l'chora is not muktzah. Okay, moving along to Sif Lamed Tes. These are halachas that are negeya to people. Also, l'taltal behema chaya v'oif. Any kind of animal is muktzah on Shabbos. A bal chai is muktzah. And the Mechaber specifies behema, domesticated animals, cows, chickens, chaya, non-domesticated animals, a dog, it would be a chaya, I believe. For oif, birds, so people have pet birds, they're all muktzah. All of these animals are muktzah. V'afal PK, nevertheless, mutter lichbais es asal lifnei ha'efroichim. Let's say you have little baby chicks, and the little baby chicks have to be able to climb up into their coop. And they're not big enough yet to be able to go up the ladder or whatever it is that you have going up to the coop. So what you want to do is you want to build like a little staircase for the chicks to go up. So you want to take a bowl and you want to put it upside down on the ground. So now the chick could hop up on the bowl and then it'll hop up from the bowl into the coop. That's what the Mechaber is talking about here. V'afal pikein, even though the animal itself, so let's say the chick, is muktzah, mutter lichbais es asal lifnei ha'efroichim, you're allowed to overturn a basket or a bowl or some other kind of keli in front of the chicks, kedei sheyalu v'yerdu bai, so that they should be able to use it as a step. Uba'idam olav asal l'taltaloi. But while the chick would be on the overturned barrel would be muktzah. So we have to kind of, break it down, this sif, into its pieces and explain each one. The first one is the Pashat halacha, which is behema chaya v'oif are muktzah. So your pet parakeets are muktzah, and your pet fish are muktzah, and your pet dog is muktzah, and your pet chickens are muktzah. All of your balei chayim are muktzah on Shabbos, and they are also betiltel. Having said that, the Mechaber said, if there's a need to set up a keli so that the animal could go onto the keli, his case, the chick should hop up on an overturned basket to be able to jump up into the coop. You're allowed to do that. What's the chiddush? We're going to see in the Mishnah Berurah, the chiddush is that this is not called being mavatal kli mehechanoi. So that you're allowed to do. But the final point that the Mechaber made was, but you should know, if you do overturn a basket, so a basket is a kli shemalachta leheter, you're allowed to move it. If you overturn a basket and now the chick jumps up onto the basket, right now, while the chick is on the basket becomes muktzah. Because right now, it's a basas l'davar aser. It's supporting a muktzah chick. So right now, the basket is aser. When the chick hops off the basket and hops into the coop, now the basket is no longer muktzah. It was only muktzah for the time that the chick was on it. Now, the Mishnah Berurah is going to point out, were this to happen during Ben Hashmashas, if the chick would have been on the basket for the entire twilight period of Ben Hashmashas, then we would employ the rule of Migu Diskatsoyle Ben Hashmashas Iskatsoyle Kula Yuma. But it wasn't on the basket during Ben Hashmashas. It went on the basket 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Shabbos afternoon. So at 2:59, the basket was a Kli Shemalachta Leheter. You're allowed to move it. At 3 o'clock, the chick hopped onto it. Now it's muktzah. At 3:01, the chick hops off. Now the basket is no longer muktzah. Because you can't create a basis for the entirety of Shabbos, in the middle of Shabbos. That's the rule of Ein Muktzah L'Chatzi Yom. There's no... If something becomes muktzah smack in the middle of Shabbos, it doesn't become designated as muktzah for the entirety of Shabbos. That magic only happens during Ben Hashmashas. Miga dis katsoy le Ben Hashmashas is katsoy le kula yuma. Okay, that's a basic breakdown of the sif. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah that's going to repeat a lot of what I just said out. Balachai animals are muktzah. Dehem b'chlal muktzah ketzim v'avonim. Your puppy is muktzah machmas gufay. It's like sticks and stones. Why? The haloi chazu. It's not usable on Shabbos. It's not a keli. It's not a meichel. It doesn't have any usage on Shabbos. Now, the Paiskim, they talk about, what do you mean? Dogs don't have a usage? People have a pet dog. They love to play with it. They love to cuddle with it. No, the Rishonim say that that does not constitute a usage that makes it non-muktzah. A Baal Chai is muktzah. Tahal loy chazu. Va'afilim yachal agia lehefser al yodam. Even if the Baal Chai might cause you a financial loss. Kigoin, for example, sheha'oif pareach al gabe akelim v'yachal l'shavram. Let's say you have a bird, a big bird or a chicken, that's hopping on a glass keli and it might break the keli. So you want to grab the bird and you want to take it off the keli. Nope, you're not allowed to grab hold of the bird and take it off the keli. This is true even if it's a bird that's domesticated and it's used to living in the house and it's used to going into its cage. So there's no shaili of tzod. There's no shaili of trapping. We're going to learn later that a bird like that, that's used to being in the house, and it always comes home on its own, and it always goes up into its cage, there's no shail of tzad, because it's nitzaid va'oimid. It's considered already trapped. It's not that you trapped it on Shabbos. So what the Mishnah Berurah is saying over here is, we're discussing muktzah. Forget about tzad. Even if there's no shail of tzad, you still have a problem of muktzah. The only thing you could do is, the bird is on the glass keli, you're afraid it's going to break the glass keli, you could shoo it away. You could try to yell at it. You could try to scare it away. But you cannot grab hold of it, because it is muktzah. We've spoken this out before. We do not relax the isurei muktzah because of hefsid. So over here, the bird is muktzah. It's a Baal Chai, it's muktzah. You're not allowed to grab it even b'makom hefsid. However, the Mechaber said you could overturn a basket to let the chick hop on. You might wonder, if you're telling me that while the chick is on the basket is muktzah. So remember, we spoke out a long time ago already, the concept of bittul kli mehechanoi. If you take a keli, like a basket, which is a kli shemalachta leheter, it's totally usable. It's totally not muktzah. And now you do something to it that makes it muktzah, that's being mevatel a kli mehechanoi. You're taking a keli which was muchan, and which was able to be used on Shabbos, you're making it muktzah. Now, by making it muktzah, you're doing two things. One is, you're fixing it in place. You know why? Because you're not allowed to move it. That might be a shaila of boine. It's like you're building something, because you're fixing it in its place. The other problem is that you're doing seiser. You're destroying the keli. Why are you destroying it? It's not destroyed. Yeah, but a minute ago, it was usable. Now it's not usable. Therefore, bittul kli mehechanoi is a problem. Now, isn't that what you're doing over here? You're taking the basket, you're turning it over, you're letting the chick hop up on it. Now it's bittul kli mehechanoi. Says the Mishnah Berurah, no, it's not a problem. You know why? Interesting svara. Because it's not true. You're not being mevatel at mehechanoi. The chick is going to hop on it. 30 seconds later, if you want to use the keli, shoo, 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 go away, chick. You scare it away, and now it goes off. And now you can use the keli. So says the Mishnah Berurah, that's the chiddush over here. There's no problem with bittul kli mehechanoi. While the chick is on the basket, it is muktzah, you're not allowed to use it. Had it been on the basket during the Ben Hashmashas period, pashtus for the entirety of the Ben Hashmashas period, aser afal pisha yardu, then the basket would remain aser even after the chick goes off, because of the golden rule, demigadis katzai le Ben Hashmashas is katzai lekule yuma. Now, there are animals that are not muktzah. One interesting example would be a seeing eye dog. A seeing eye dog, pashtus, is not muktzah because it is muchan. The point, the very total point of the seeing eye dog is for the blind person to be metaltal it. It guides him around and everything else. So pashtas, according to most paiskim, a seeing eye dog is not muktzah. There's also an interesting shaila when it comes to a fish tank. Interestingly enough, there are paiskim that look at a fish tank. They don't look at it as a glass tank that is containing fish. The fish is muktzah, and the fish tank is a basis l'davar ha'aser. There are many paiskim that seem not to look at it that way. They look at the whole fish tank as one piece in totality. It is a decoration. And it's a decoration. If it's a small fish tank, it might be a decoration that's considered a portable decoration. Now, a 55-gallon or 100-gallon fish tank is not a portable decoration. I think that's something that is meant not to be moved, because if you move it, you'll break it. But a very small fish tank, like a 5-gallon tank, could be moved. Interesting shaila. Interesting to see how the paiskim talk about it. Okay, I want to push ahead a little bit weiter. Let's do Sif Mem. Says the Mechaber, Kol behema chayav ha'oif. This is an interesting halacha. So we have established that an animal is muktzah. Now, what's the halacha of muktzah? You're not allowed to move it. Now remember what we've said. Moving a muktzah item really means uprooting it from its place and relocating it. Making it shake is not really tiltal muktzah. Tiltal muktzah means to uproot it and put it down somewhere else. So now, the animal is muktzah. Now sometimes there's a need to kind of urge an animal to move, to go somewhere else. Says the Mechaber, Kol behema chayav ha'oif, any animal, which we said is muktzah, medadim oisam bechotzer. If you're in the chotzer, so that's a place that there's no iser of hoitzah, you're not rishus harabim, you're in a chotzer, and pashtus, a chotzer me'ureves, is a chotzer that has bechitzis, and it has a proper ruve chatzeris. So there's no Isser of Haitzah here. We're not dealing with the Isser of Haitzah. We're dealing with the Isser of Muktzah. You're allowed to help them move in the Chotzer. What does that mean? You could grab onto their neck, ubatstadim, or onto the sides of their bodies, umaylichan, and you could kind of guide them. Let's go, puppy, move it. So you could take the animal by the back of the neck and kind of move it along. You can take it by the sides of its body and move it along. If you're doing this for the needs of the animal, maybe you need to direct the animal to where its food is. Maybe you need to direct the animal into its shelter, so it should be protected at night. So for these reasons, you're allowed to go ahead and do this very minor form of tiltal, with a caveat, says the Mechaber. But you cannot lift them up in such a manner that they will lift their feet off the ground. Because once they lift their feet off the ground, now you're being metaltal muktzah. What we're discussing is helping the animal move. Its feet will always be on the ground. Maybe it'll pick up 1 or 2 feet and then put them back down. It's going to walk. But the animal's always going to be in contact with the ground. You're helping move it along. That's a very minor form of tiltal. And will be matir, that minor form of tiltal, for tzar ba'alei chayim. So if you need to help the animal, you need to guide it to its food, you need to get it into its shelter. If you don't, there's going to be tzar ba'alei chayim. So because of tzar ba'alei chayim, we're going to be matir this. You can't pick them up so that their feet come off the ground because they're muktzah. However, a chicken, you're not allowed to do this with. You're not allowed to take a chicken by the neck and help it walk. You're not allowed to hold the sides of its body and help it walk because it's going to take its feet off the ground, and then you're doing actual tiltal. But what you could do is, don't grab hold of the animal. You could push the chicken from behind it. So you're not grabbing the animal so that if it picks its feet up off the ground, now you're holding the animal and you're holding it off the ground, and now you're doing real tiltal. You could just put your hand behind it and push it. Let's go, chick. Move it. You could push it from behind with your hands so that it should go into the coop. Says the Mishnah Berurah, cut and kuf bem des. Kol behem achayv oif bein gedolim bein ketanim. Says what the Mishnah Berurah is saying over here is, the Mechaber in the beginning of the Sif says, you could be midaded them in the chotzer. In the chotzer, you can help them move, but not in Rishos HaRabim. Now, why can't you do this in Rishos HaRabim? What's the difference? Why is there an angle of Hoitzah here? The answer is that the Chazal were afraid. If they're going to allow you to do this in Rishos HaRabim, you might come to pick up the animal in Rishos HaRabim, and if you pick up the animal in Rishos HaRabim and transport it to Daled Amos, you'll be over in Issa Daraisa of Hoitzah. So this is mutter in the chotzer, but it's not mutter in Rishos HaRabim. Now, you might think that that only applies to a small portable animal, but how about a cow? How about a 1,000-pound cow? Are we going to worry that you can't do this in Rishos HaRabim because you might come to lift it up and you might be over Eitzah? You would think not. But says the Mishnah Berurah, yes, ben g'dolim ben ketanim. This is only mutter in a chotzer. It's also in the Rishos HaRabim, both by small animals and even by big animals. Even by big animals, Chazal said, you can't assist the animal to walk in Rishos HaRabim, a gzera shema yagbiyem, a gzera that you might come to lift it up. Why does that apply to a 1,000-pound animal? It doesn't. But if we're going to allow you to do it by the 1,000-pound animal, you might do it by the 50-pound puppy. Says the Mishnah Berurah, is cut and kuf dun b'chotzer. This is only mutter in the chotzer of Eloi B'Rishos HaRabim. The gazvinan shema yagbiyem v'yavirim arba amos v'yischayv chatos. The gabe behem Eloi Yamrinon chai noisi esatzmai. You might wonder, why is there gzera shema yagbiyem? Even if you pick it up, why is that an issa daraisa? We know the rule chai noisi esatzmai. A living being is seen as supporting its own weight. That doesn't apply to animals. V'ayin b'tor desfirle the bekarmelis nami asal adadis k'may B'Rishos HaRabim. Interesting shaila. How about in a karmelis? This is something that we've touched upon earlier. Usually we apply the rule that if there's a type of haitzah that's only aser midrabanan, then it's mutter in a karmelis. So to assist the animal to walk in Rishos HaRabim is only aser midrabanan gzera shema yagbiyem. So then in a karmelis it should be mutter. But there's a lot of complexities in that, and here we have a machloikis. V'chein pasuk alavush, t'loike beis Yosef shemitzad l'hakol b'zeh. M'kamakim nireh de ba'agolim gedolim mutter l'dalis b'karmelis. The Mishnah Berurah takes the position that if you're talking about big heavy animals, like big heavy calves, that would be mutter in a karmelis, ein baran shuva beis Yosef. Ois katan kuf don aleph, im tzrichen, this heter to help the animal walk is only if it's for the needs of the animal. And what's the basis of the heter? Ubishum tzar balechayim. Dim loikein asas lasis kain. Without the heter of tzar balechayim, this would not be mutter. The kol midi deloichazi lutiltel, because anytime something is muktzah, kishem she'ein metaltel and kulai, the same way you're not allowed to move it in its entirety, kach ein metaltel and miktzasai, you're also not allowed to move part of it. K'moshe mevur Siman shin yod al sev zayin gabi meis shelo yazez mimenu ever. Let's say you have Nebuch, a corpse, a dead body, laying on the ground. So to pick up the corpse and move the corpse, that's tiltul muktzah. You're picking it up and you're relocating it. But how about to pick up an arm or pick up a leg? You're not relocating the body, but yet that is aser. That's called tiltul muktzah. So that's tiltul miktzasai, but it's aser. Helping the animal walk along, we're calling it tiltul miktzasai. Because it's true, you're not lifting it off the ground, right? But you are relocating it, and you're kind of doing it aver at a time. In other words, the animal lifts up one leg is off the ground, and now it's getting relocated to another position, so it's tiltul miktzasai. But that normally would be aser. It's a mutter over here because it's tzar balechayim. Ice cotton kuf done bays by a chicken. You're not allowed to do this. Medaded, you're not allowed to assist the chicken to walk because he'll lift both legs off the ground and you'll be carrying it. Aval doichan I saw, but you could push it from behind. Aval lebeina lotzarcha kedei la'achila. But if you're not doing it in order to bring it to its food so it should eat, elo l'tay altoy kedei shaloyavali they have sin mammon. If the only reason you want to relocate the chicken is because you don't want to lose the chicken, you're afraid something might eat it. It got out of the backyard and now it's loose somewhere and you're afraid you're going to lose it. Or if it went off the eggs that it was roosting on, and you want to get it back onto its eggs. So he said over here, I misread this. You're allowed to push it from behind, even if you're not doing it for the chicken's purposes to bring it to its food. You're doing it for your own purposes because you don't want to take a hefsid. You're still allowed to do this, or you want to get it back on its eggs. So even though we said earlier that we don't relax the halachas of muktzah, b'makom hefsid, it seems that over here, where we're only being matir, a very, very minor form of tiltul muktzah, that the Mishnah Berurah is saying we could relax b'makom hefsid. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. This list of limud HaTorah should be made against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua's refuahs parnassah sheduchim to those in need. We should be zeicher to see the BS called Tzedek. B'mher v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.